In October 2009, Bobby Jamison, his wife Sherilyn, and their daughter Madison packed their truck and drove into the remote Sans Bois Mountains in Oklahoma. Their stated reason for the trip was to look at a plot of land they wanted to buy. They vanished. 8 days later, local hunters found the family's truck abandoned on a lonely, curving dirt road. It was locked, and there was no sign of the family anywhere nearby. Inside, investigators found a situation that defied easy explanation. The family's beloved dog, Maisie, was still trapped in the cab. She had survived over a week without food or water and was severely malnourished. The rest of the truck's contents were perfectly intact. Their wallets, IDs, cell phones, GPS units, and heavy jackets were left behind. Even more unusually, sitting entirely untouched, tucked directly under the driver's seat, was a bank bag holding $32,000 in cash. A massive search operation immediately mobilized. Teams spent weeks combing the rugged, unforgiving wilderness around the vehicle, but the dense terrain yielded absolutely nothing. It took 4 years for a break in the case. In November 2013, hunters discovered the heavily decomposed skeletal remains of Bobby, Sherilyn, and little Madison resting together just 3 miles from where their truck had been parked. Because the bodies had been exposed to the elements for years, forensic pathologists could never establish a medical cause of death. Law enforcement was left with a complete vacuum of physical evidence on the remains themselves. To figure out what happened, they had to rely entirely on the physical inconsistencies left at the truck to dismantle every conventional theory. The most immediate assumption was a financially motivated crime. The Sans Bois Mountains had a well-documented problem with illegal crystal meth operations. Bringing a $32,000 bankroll into deep woods notorious for drug manufacturing suggested a deal gone wrong or a targeted ambush, but the evidence instantly breaks that logic. The $32,000 sum was left completely untouched inside the locked vehicle. If the motive was robbery, perpetrators would have taken the money. Criminals do not ambush a family and abandon the financial prize. The presence of the cash reduces the likelihood of an external attack. If an outsider didn't strike the family, investigators had to consider that the danger originated from within the family unit itself. That led police to examine the possibility of internal violence, a murder-suicide triggered by the extreme stress of a collapsing marriage. Searching the truck, detectives uncovered an 11-page letter written by Sherilyn to her husband. The pages were filled with intense resentment and emotional volatility, painting a picture of deep psychological instability and a toxic, deteriorating household. Yet the scene deep in the woods directly contradicted the idea of a sudden, violent outburst. When the remains were finally found, Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison were lying face down, side by side, in a perfectly neat row. A deliberate, orderly resting place like this does not align with a chaotic struggle. It lacks the physical scattering expected from a panicked flight into the forest, or an impulsive, aggressive attack by one spouse against the other. Furthermore, carefully locking their dog in the truck so it would slowly starve over many days does not fit the rapid timeline of a quick, spontaneous tragedy. The methodical placement of the bodies and the deliberate confinement of the dog indicate a process that was slow and intentional. This points away from standard domestic violence toward a much darker, shared psychological break. When two people in close proximity feed off each other's delusions, they can develop shared psychosis, an extreme state of mutual paranoia that entirely overtakes their reality. In the weeks before they left, Bobby had been displaying severe paranoia. He even approached a local pastor to ask where he could purchase spiritual bullets to shoot the hostile entities he believed were living on his roof. Sherilyn's mental state was deteriorating along parallel lines. She had recently bought a witch's Bible and openly claimed she was physically fighting off invisible, dark forces inside their home. The clearest view into their mental state came from home security footage. It captured Bobby and Sherilyn on the day they packed their truck. They move back and forth in a robot-like trance. For hours, they pack and unpack the exact same boxes, over and over, completely unresponsive to one another and without speaking a single word. This footage suggests the Jamisons were not responding to physical danger when they drove into the wilderness. They appear to have been fleeing an internal enemy conjured by their own collapsing minds. Because the elements erased so much physical evidence over those 4 years, the precise medical mechanism of their deaths will always remain a blank space in the autopsy report. Despite the missing medical details, the behavioral evidence is difficult to ignore. The family wasn't targeted for their money or caught in a cartel crossfire. Instead, the trail of erratic behavior and intense paranoia suggests they were driven into the wilderness by a reality that had already fractured. The Jamison family enigma reminds us that in true crime, the most baffling physical evidence doesn't always point to a cunning killer. Sometimes, the evidence is simply the tragic, contradictory remnants of a family who had already lost their way.